people see a woman living alone and assume something's missing. They whisper about loneliness, failure, or abandonment. But what if they're completely wrong? What if the woman who walks alone isn't lost but free? What if she's not weak but stronger than most ever dare to be? This isn't a tragedy. It's a transformation. And it's time the world hears the truth. There's a persistent myth in our culture that a woman who lives alone must somehow be broken, lonely, or incomplete. That her solitude is a result of failure, either a failure to attract, to keep, or to conform. But the truth is far more complex and far more powerful, because solitude, when chosen consciously, is not weakness. It is strength, it is structure, it is a confrontation with the self that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. Think about it. How many people spend years bouncing from one relationship to another, not because they're deeply connected, but because they're afraid to be alone with their thoughts. They seek constant noise, constant validation, constant external structure, because the silence of solitude feels unbearable. And yet, a woman who chooses that silence, who doesn't run from it, has already begun a journey most never dare to start. She's not avoiding reality. She's staring it in the face every single day. When you're alone, there's no one to blame for your moods, your habits, your inaction. It's you, only you, and that is terrifying. For the unprepared, but for the one willing to grow, willing to wrestle with her own mind, it becomes a place of transformation. Because when you no longer need someone else to give you identity, to provide structure, or to determine your worth, you're free. Not in some romanticized, empty way. You're free in the sense that your value is no longer conditional. You become a person who chooses relationships from fullness, not desperation. This isn't about being anti-relationship or rejecting love. It's about making sure you are not defined by its absence, that your existence is not diminished because you do not currently orbit someone else's world. In solitude, a woman learns how to hold her ground, how to build a life from the inside out. She discovers that stability doesn't come from someone else's presence, but from her own capacity to endure, to think, to act, and to rebuild. And that's what society often doesn't understand. A woman living alone is not necessarily incomplete. She may in fact be more complete than many who live surrounded by people, because she has chosen to stop performing and start becoming. She has taken the path of responsibility. And with that responsibility comes the quiet reward of self-respect. So if the world tells you that you must be miserable because you live alone, let it speak, but do not let it define you, because solitude isn't a void, it's a mirror, and some people spend their entire lives too afraid to look. One of the greatest misconceptions about people who live alone, especially women, is that their lives lack structure, or that without a partner there's no real need for discipline. But nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, living alone demands more structure, not less. It requires a level of personal responsibility that most people never truly develop, because they've always relied on someone else to help carry the weight of order when no one else is there to set your schedule, to tell you when to get up, what needs to be done, or when it's time to rest. You become the architect of your own life. That kind of autonomy can be overwhelming for those who have never learned how to govern themselves, but for the woman who lives alone and accepts that challenge, it becomes the very thing that strengthens her. She doesn't wait for someone to give her direction. She creates it. She learns to build her own rhythm, set her own goals, and hold herself accountable, not because someone is watching, but because she has decided to take herself seriously. And this is something profoundly admirable, because it's easy to be productive when someone is pushing you. It's easy to stay on track when you're being watched or praised, but when there's no applause, no reminder, no external reward, you have to ask yourself, why am I doing this? And if your answer is rooted in purpose, in responsibility, in the desire to grow, then you've found something rare. That's not weakness. That's not loneliness. That's discipline. That's self-leadership. There's a quiet dignity in the woman who wakes up and gets on with it, who maintains her space, shows up to her obligations, and builds a life of meaning not for anyone else's approval, but because she's decided that her own effort is worth it. She's not sitting in waiting. She's not using independence as a mask for bitterness. She's working, building, choosing, and that discipline doesn't just serve her. It becomes a foundation for whatever she chooses to add to her life later. If love comes, it comes to someone who knows how to carry herself. If partnership arises, it's joining with a person who's already in motion, not waiting for someone else to initiate growth. That's the key. Living alone isn't about resisting relationship. It's about developing the inner strength necessary to enter one with clarity, not neediness, with direction, not dependency. So when you look at the woman who lives alone, don't assume she's drifting. There's a very good chance she's sharpening. She's learning what it means to lead herself. And there's nothing passive about that. There's this deeply ingrained belief in our culture that if someone is alone, they must be unhappy. That if a woman lives by herself, she must be missing something essential: companionship, fulfillment, joy. But this assumption reveals more about our own discomfort with solitude than it does about the lives of those who choose it. Society often confuses independence with isolation, as if the absence of constant external stimulation means the presence of inner emptiness. That's simply not true. In fact, for many women who live alone, what they've cultivated is not loneliness, it's clarity. In the quiet, they've discovered the difference between being alone and feeling alone. And that difference is everything, because you can be surrounded by people and still feel completely disconnected. You can be in a relationship and feel unseen. You can share a home with someone and still be emotionally abandoned. But when you live alone and learn to find peace in your own presence, that's not a sign of emotional lack. It's a sign of maturity. Think about it. When you no longer rely on someone else to validate your experience, to entertain you, or to give your life meaning, you're stepping into a level of emotional strength that most people never develop. And it's not that these women don't want connection, of course they do. We're wired for it. But the key difference is that they're not dependent on it for their sense of identity. That's what makes them powerful, because they're not driven by the fear of being alone. They're driven by the desire to live meaningfully, even if it means doing so outside the traditional narrative. And here's where things get uncomfortable for some people. A woman who doesn't need validation is harder to manipulate. She's not impressed by status or promises. She's not looking to be rescued. She's already chosen herself, and she's living out that choice every day. That unsettles those who are used to gaining control through emotional dependency. It challenges systems built on the assumption that women are always waiting for love, for security, for someone to give them purpose. But what if she already found it? Many of these women have built rich lives full of purpose, service, learning, and contribution. They have friendships rooted in depth, careers built on passion, and spiritual lives anchored in discipline. They are not wandering, they are walking with direction. And they are not alone because they can't find someone. Often, they are alone because they refuse to settle for less than something real. So when society looks at them with pity or projects its own fears onto their solitude, it reveals just how much we've misunderstood what it means to live a full life. Because fulfillment isn't measured by who sits next to you at dinner. It's measured by whether or not you're at peace when no one else is in the room. In the silence of solitude, something remarkable happens. Without the constant presence of another person to mirror your behavior or influence your choices, you begin to discover who you actually are, not the version of you that adapts to meet someone else's expectations, not the self that compromises to keep the peace, but the core of your being, your values, your instincts, your beliefs. That kind of self-discovery isn't possible when you're constantly adjusting for the comfort of others. It takes space, it takes silence, and it takes the courage to sit in that silence without running from it. When a woman lives alone, she isn't just managing space, she's managing identity. For perhaps the first time in her life, she has no one to perform for, no need to dilute her opinions to avoid conflict, no pressure to dim her light, protect someone else's ego. In that space, she begins to ask herself questions she might never have had the freedom to explore before. What do I believe? What do I want? What matters to me when no one is watching? These questions are not indulgent, they are necessary. because until you can answer them honestly, you will always risk building a life that isn't truly yours. This is where solitude becomes transformational, because identity is not formed in reaction to others, it's formed in reflection. If you're always caught up in the noise of pleasing, adapting, or surviving relational dynamics, you never have time to listen to your own inner compass. But when you live alone, every choice becomes a dialogue with yourself. What time you get up, how you structure your day, the book you read, the food you eat, the energy you allow into your home. It all reflects what you're building within. There's no one to hide behind, there's no one to blame, there's just you and the mirror of your actions, and that's not a burden, it's a gift, because out of that quiet you start to shape something real. You stop reacting to the world and start responding to your own values. You don't just exist, you live with intention, and when the time comes that you do invite someone into that space, you're not asking them to complete you, you're not asking them to rescue you, you're inviting them into something already formed, already whole. That's the difference between a relationship built on fear and one built on freedom. The woman who learns who she is in solitude walks into the world differently. She's not swayed by noise. She's not lost in distraction. She's grounded. Because she didn't find her identity in someone else's gaze. She carved it out in silence. One of the most overlooked aspects of a woman living alone is the way she develops emotional resilience. Not out of necessity, but out of practice. Day after day, she learns to navigate challenges without relying on someone else to stabilize her mood or carry the emotional weight for her. She becomes her own anchor, not because she has to prove anything to anyone, but because she understands that inner stability is the foundation of everything else, and you don't build that stability in comfort. You build it in resistance. When something goes wrong, there's no one to shift the blame to, no partner to absorb the stress, no fallback person to fix the problem. It's you face it, you handle it, and slowly, through this repetition, you begin to recognize your own strength. Not the kind of strength that's loud or performative, but the quiet kind. The kind that shows up when no one's watching, when things don't go your way, when you're tired and no one is there to tell you to keep going. You tell yourself, and that voice becomes reliable, steady, yours. Most people don't understand how powerful it is to go through pain alone and still come out whole. It doesn't mean you don't feel the hurt. It means you've trained yourself to move through it, to sit with it, to extract wisdom from it rather than run from it, and that ability, that discipline of facing things as they are, becomes one of the greatest assets a person can carry into any future relationship or life challenge, because emotional resilience isn't about suppressing pain, it's about making space for it, understanding it, and choosing not to be ruled by it. And what happens over time is that you stop being reactive, you stop being controlled by every emotional wave that hits, you start responding rather than panicking. You learn to slow down, to think clearly, to feel without collapsing. That emotional independence is rare, and it's earned, not through theory, not through someone telling you to be strong, but through real life experience, through quiet nights, unanswered questions, hard days, and deep reflection. And it's not that these women don't still desire connection. It's that they no longer see relationships as a crutch to escape their feelings. They're not looking for someone to do the inner work for them. They've already done it. So if someone enters their life, it's not because they need saving, it's because they're open to building something solid from a place of mutual strength. That's the difference between love born out of desperation and love born out of clarity. And emotional clarity only comes when you've walked through the fire alone and realized you didn't burn. You were forged. There's something deeply misunderstood about fulfillment. People assume it's a prize waiting at the end of some achievement, or that it's something handed to you once all the pieces of life fall perfectly into place: career, relationships, wealth. But real fulfillment, the kind that actually lasts, is not given, it's cultivated, and often it's cultivated in places people don't expect, like in solitude, like in a life lived without constant external validation, like in a Woman's quiet decision to find meaning in her own journey, even when no one else is clapping for her. When a woman lives alone, she isn't just existing, she's shaping something intentional, and in that intention, she often finds a kind of richness that's difficult to explain to someone who's never had to stand on their own. She discovers what it means to love her own company, not as a consolation prize, but as a source of genuine joy. She finds pleasure in the details, organizing her space, setting her own rhythm, waking up to silence and realizing it brings her peace, not fear. She creates beauty on her own terms, and that beauty feeds her. People might say, but isn't it lonely? And sure, there are moments of longing, that's part of the human condition, but what most don't understand is that she's not avoiding connection. She's preparing for it. She's not closing herself off from love. She's building the kind of internal world that can hold love without clinging to it, without distorting it. Because if you don't know who you are, if you've never found peace on your own, then no relationship will fix that. At best, it will distract you. At worst, it will destroy you. So when a woman learns to be fulfilled alone, she's not just doing herself a favor. She's doing any future relationship a favor too. She's bringing wholeness, not holes. She's not asking to be completed, she's asking to be met. That's a very different posture, and ironically, it's often from that place of contentment that the right doors begin to open, because people are drawn to those who don't need them to be okay. There's a quiet power in someone who has learned to be enough on their own. This is the truth that people often overlook. Fulfillment isn't about having it all. It's about appreciating what you have, building a life you respect, and becoming someone you're proud to be even when no one else is watching. And when that becomes your baseline, anything added to your life isn't filling a void. It's expanding a foundation that's already strong. That kind of fulfillment is real, it's lasting, and it doesn't depend on who walks in or out of your life. Because when you learn to carry peace within you, you stop chasing it everywhere else. So here we are, standing face to face with a truth most people avoid, that a woman living alone is not a symbol of failure, nor is she incomplete. She is not broken. She is not lacking. In fact, she might be the most self-aware, emotionally disciplined, and spiritually aligned person in the room, because she has chosen not to live by the script handed to her by fear or tradition, but to write her own, even if that means walking alone for a while. Her solitude is not a prison, it's a proving ground, a sacred space where identity is clarified, resilience is forged, and inner peace becomes non-negotiable. That kind of strength doesn't shout, it doesn't beg for approval, it doesn't need permission, it just is, and it speaks volumes without saying a word. So if the world doesn't understand her, so be it. She doesn't live for the world's applause, she lives for truth, she lives for meaning, and she lives fully, even if she walks that road alone. And maybe, just maybe, that's not weakness at all. Maybe that's the highest form of strength.